All right, even 3 seats in Delhi would be going to elections and they would poll on the first phase of polling, which is the 25th of November. But polling in 5 phases for both states of Jammu and Kashmir and Jharkhand. To get in reactions, I'd like to cut across. Joining me right now from Srinagar is my colleague Shujaul Haq, our executive editor Javed Ansari, to give us a larger perspective on these election dates. I'd also like to cut across to Rohit Singh, who's joining me from Jharkhand at this point of time. First up, I'd like to directly cut across to Shuja. Shuja, the NC was the only party which was opposed to elections taking place in time, and contrary to what Omar Abdullah might have hoped, the first phase kicks in come the 25th of November.
Well, that's right. This definitely has come as a shocker to the National Conference, which has been completely against holding the elections, particularly in the winters. The party has been saying that at a time when the floods have ravaged the entire valley, it's very difficult for us to go ahead and go through the process of polls. But now that the Election Commission has come up and with the dates as well, and that too first phase starting just about a month from now. Clearly, National Conference is not very happy with it. But at the same time, there are other political parties like PDP and BJP, yes, which have been advocating that the elections should be conducted at their own time. But the big question here is that it's a humongous task to conduct elections in a state like Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh,
yes,
and at a time when floods have been.
And that's the question I want to ask you, Shuja, very quickly before I cut across to Javed. That's the question I want to ask you. Is the state right now ready for elections? You've been keeping track of all the relief work which is going on in the state. All right, we seem to have lost our audio connect with Shuja. We're going to try and reconnect to him, but I'd like to cut across for a larger perspective to Javed Ansari, our executive editor, who's live with us. Javed, a lot of implications of especially for the state of Jammu and Kashmir, because at this point of time, the NC was opposed. They wanted elections later, keeping in mind the backlash that it has suffered for the lack of what many people say proper relief operations being conducted in the state. The other question I want to ask you is, there was this whole thrust for the BJP when it came down to their Mission Kashmir. Now, even that quite not on track because they haven't been able to campaign like they would have hoped.
Well, but this is something that will affect all parties. If for one reason or the other, whether it's the elements or due to other reasons, political parties cannot campaign they want to, it will affect all parties, not just the BJP, yes, or the NC or the PDP or the Congress, but all parties across the board. So there's a level playing field as far as that is concerned. Whether the state is ready or not, Mr. Omar Abdullah and the NC would have us believe that but it is not, that there are lots of people who are outside living in refugee camps and that the state infrastructure has caved in and it's not entirely up on its feet, and therefore the state is not in a position to hold elections. But I just interviewed the Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. Sampath, and he seemed extremely confident. He says all the measures are in place. We've factored in all these situations, and he appeared extremely confident that the turnout would be good and that elections would be held in a free, fair and transparent manner.
Javed, stay on with us. We're going to get in a quick word from my colleague Rohit. Rohit, 5-phase election for Jharkhand as well, 23rd, along with Jammu and Kashmir. That is where counting would be for the state. All right. We seem to be having an audio link problem with Rohit. We're going to try and re-establish that. But to give perspective on the latest that we're tracking, Mr. Sampath just announced dates for both Jharkhand, Jammu, Kashmir, also 3 seats in Delhi, which would be going into by-elections, and they would poll on the same date of the first phase, which is the 25th of November. Jammu and Kashmir, dates being announced, the NC would have not liked it on time. They wanted delayed elections, especially where the state, they say, is battling from the impact of the elements, the floods.